In the description to this live, you will have all of the links to the podcast episodes that we did with all of our guests today, and also the link to their websites and things like that. So you can check them out anytime, right? So first of all, we've got. I will just go with my direction on the screen, so get used to it. So we've got Jacob Bricca, and Jacob is actually the author of amazing book, documentary editing, which I love, and that's how we got in touch. He edited, for example, Missing in Brooks County, which is an awesome documentary. I strongly encourage you to watch it. Elísabet Ronaldsdóttir, Bullet Train, this year the most hot movie of one of the most hot movies of the year, and like I could name many more titles, but again, Elísabet probably needs no introduction from many of you anyway. We've got Audrey Simonaud, right, and known for Taken 2, Taken 3. The list goes on. We've got Vashi. Vashi, I will name a funny title, Sharknado 2, right? That's the title that gives a lot of fun.
The best of the Sharknadoes, correct.
Yeah. We've got Simon Smith with this year Andor on Disney Plus, right? Amazing series. It gets amazing reviews online as well. And we've got Mike Hugo, who edited Hypochondriac and also was an assistant editor for Sean Baker on his movie The Florida Project, which I absolutely love, one of my favorite movies ever. Yeah, that's you, and I'm so grateful to have all of you here. The way it will go is we'll start with this first part in which I will ask all of you one question. I will ask you a few questions, but basically one question that is addressed to each one of you, right? Then we'll have another round where you will have the opportunity to ask questions between one another. I'm sure you will have some things that you will like to discuss, and then we'll have a Q&A session for all the people in the chat, all the people on YouTube. The priority goes to the Editing Chef students, so they might actually call in to the live stream, and we might have them asking the questions personally. And that's pretty much how it goes. So I want to start with a warm-up question about what movies are you, what movies that are about to be released are you most excited about, or just released recently, were released recently. So I'll start with Jacob. Jacob, how about you?
This is not one that's about to be released. It was released a while ago, but I was really floored by the series The Rehearsal on HBO, the Nathan Fielder multi-part series, which is is it a documentary? Is it a reality show? Is it what the hell is it? It is such a bizarre, wild concept, and it's so interestingly presented that that's one of the most interesting things I've seen lately. It's not really like a piece of cinema, but in terms of it, as I understand it, just the way that they came about what it ended up being, a super organic process where they're sort of chasing the story as it's being made. And I'm not a huge fan necessarily of super meta things that sort of turn in on themselves, but this one was that times 12, and it was just it had a lot of humanity. It was very surprising. That's one thing that I've really enjoyed recently.
Okay, thank you. Great. Vashi, how about you?
Oh, jumped it up on me. Let's see. I think after seeing the preview and stuff, I'd like to see Avatar when it comes out into theater in the most grand 3D immersion thing. I'm open to 3D on that one. I think there's a time and place for that format, and I think that film will do it. And never bet against James Cameron, so that's what I'm looking forward to the most right now. And I think the favorite film I've seen recently, I've seen Tar twice in the last 2 days, and that's just very strong and very engaging and very thought-provoking and beautifully shot, beautifully edited. It just really flows, and it says so much, and I want to watch it again, honestly. Kate's performance is unbelievable, so I really enjoyed that.
Perfect. Elísabet, how about you?
Well, I'm actually we are going through principal photography just now, so it's freaking crazy. So I haven't seen a lot, and I really look forward to seeing Tar. Also because my friend does the music, so I'm super excited for her. But I look forward to seeing Babylon. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping.
Me too.
3 hours in like 8 minutes.
I know
Right.
we're not watching that during principal photography, that's for sure. But yeah, I look forward to that.
Me too. I feel like it will
3
be a little
hours.
bit different, Daniel Chazelle's movie. We'll see. Mike, how about you?
Yeah.
I am looking forward to see Bardot.
Mhm.
I do like the mind twisters, and making the audience be active is what I really, really love. And I think I'm wondering if this is going to make any sense whatsoever. And so that's kind of the thing. I love these puzzle pieces, and I love to try to track along and be thrown off. The wife hates me because she can't watch movies with me because I'm guessing what's going to come up next. And a lot of times I'm pretty close. So she's just like, stop talking.
Oh no,
So Bardot.
you're one of those guys. No, I can't watch a movie with you.
You're ruining it for her.
I'm ruining it.
Audrey.
Well, before Vashi said it, I was thinking about Avatar 2
Yeah.
also, because it's always big moments of real cinema, and also there's Kate Winslet in it, and she's my favorite actress ever, and I want to see what she delivers in this movie, new collaboration with James Cameron.
Yeah.
So that's it. that was the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And Simon, how about you?
I think my favourite film of the year, and actually I'm going to watch it again over Christmas. I'm going to try and watch it with a friend when he comes over at Christmas, was Athena, which is on Netflix. It's by a director called Roman Gavras. He directed like a bunch of my favourite music videos, and it's like gang warfare, but the film opens with, I don't know, a 25-minute like single shot, and it's probably like one of the most incredible single shots I've ever seen. It makes 1917 look like like play school. It's absolutely incredible. So I'm sure many people won't have seen it. I haven't seen it advertised very much anywhere. So check out Athena on Netflix.
Yeah, Athena is great. I've watched it as well. Super strong movie. But I love 1917 as well. And like, by the way, if you want to watch a one take film, I strongly encourage anyone to watch it. Victoria 2015 movie. It's one take in real time, and it doesn't have even fake cuts in it, right? Like Birdman and things like that. You have these hidden cuts in them. In Victoria, it's out of the can basically. It's amazing. It's super strong movie as well. I love it.
Yeah, it's exactly what editors want to hear.
That's true. That's true.
Then one take.
Wow. Yeah, I shot in my knee, I guess, but that's true. Yeah. Okay.
Know your room, Piotr.
The first question is gonna be a difficult one. But we're gonna do it anyway. And by the way, let me ask it first. Then I have just one piece of information, and you will go, Jacob. You will go first because you're first on the screen for me. So the question will be, what was the best piece of editing advice you have ever gotten? And before we go with it, I just want to say that for everyone watching on YouTube, you can, or on the Riverside for the Editing Chef students, you can ask your questions in the chat as you go. Ricardo is there. Ricardo is looking through all of the questions, putting them for us to answer later, as many of them as we can. So feel free to drop questions as we go, basically. Okay, Jacob. So, what was the best piece of editing advice you have ever gotten?
Well, I'm just going to take something from a conversation I had with Jeffrey Richman, who is an editor who I just really admire, who spent a couple of decades being a documentary editor, and recently he's been going into cutting scripted stuff. The first scripted series was Escape at Danmora, was a multi-part series, and he's done a lot of stuff since then. And his thing was just about, and this is a lot of people have heard this before, but it was about the idea that you're problem solving all the time, and you're always casting for ideas, and that really one should if you can help it, you should never dismiss an idea out of hand. You should never just say, oh well, that's not going to work, and just move on. And the thing behind that is the idea that, well, no one really knows if that's going to work until you actually prosecute it and try it out and get far enough with it so that you can actually like see it play. And then the proof is right there. And in general, even if there was disagreement earlier about whether that's a good idea or if it's going to work or not, usually there's actually quite a bit of agreement about whether it actually did work, whether it did, and the proof is like right there. There it is. You tried it out, and and that's just, I think that's really wise. You are have just exploring many avenues as in all sorts of ways, and that you really have to follow an idea through in practice in order to understand what its effects might be and how it might work. And even if it doesn't go that way, it often leads to other ideas that do go to things that are breakthroughs. So that's a piece.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Never reject the idea. That's a great one. I love it. Vashi.
Oh, back to me. No, I agree with Jacob there. That's hugely critical. So many times I've poo-pooed something in the past, and then you try it and it works, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. You can't figure it out. It just happens. So never throw anything out. Give it a shot. For me, I adhere to this. I've talked to a lot of my fellow editors and mentors, and I've always done this myself anyways, but I always believe that I want to look at every frame of footage, if time allowing, before I start. Everything. And if I can, twice. Like once just as a viewer to let it hit me, osmosis, let it start setting in, then watch a second time with a critical eye, make my notes, my markers, my takes, align that with the script supervising notes if there are any, and then start cutting. So I want to be as familiar with the footage as possible. There's so many times that, as we all know, you find something that wasn't supposed to happen, or was the tail of a shot or the head of a shot that can be applied somewhere else. And I try and catalog in my brain every shot, revisiting, becoming so familiar that I can call it out and apply it even elsewhere, as opposed to where it initially should live. And I think all of us as editors have a massive capacity to intake a lot of footage, to, in whatever way we do it, organize it and be able to recall it. And I think that's a critical asset and a skill that is both earned and native to editors, and other artists. But I like to be as familiar with the footage as possible before I go in, so I can always have options in my brain to try and remember. And that one moment, that would be great over here, completely out of place. And that happens on every show. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah,
Familiarity with all the footage.
When you watch everything,
every frame.
When you watch every frame, Vashi, do you just sit in front of the screen, or do you have like a routine that you do during the time?
Again, time allowing. If obviously if I get six hours of footage in and they expect a cut by the end of the day, then I can't. But I need to watch as much as I can. And there are tricks, like you can watch from the last take forward to start at something that's been closer to the point that the director or the producers wanted, and then back into it to become more familiar. Circle takes, funnily for me, I think, don't stand up all the time. They look great on paper, but later when you put a shot with a shot, it doesn't necessarily work sometimes. So I find that interesting, where circle take is like, oh, you have to use it, and you use it, it doesn't work. Sometimes it does, but that's my thought, at least.
Awesome. Elísabet, your piece of editing advice.
Best editing advice. I think the best advice I got from a fellow editor, Valdís Óskarsdóttir, who did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And she talked about follow the eye. And this has helped me a lot with pace, because I think it affects pace, that you kind of get a streamline by following movements through edits. And, be aware where the eye is and follow the movement. And I think it's kind of a beautiful advice, but it has to do with the handwork. It has to do with the shaping of it, the polish of the work. And I've always used that. I think it's a good advice.
Yeah. It reminds me of also what Walter Murch discusses in his book. He also discusses the eye line and like the eyes being the mirror to the soul, basically.
Yeah, it's it really, and I take it to heart. I like that.
Yeah. Mike, the best piece of editing advice you have ever gotten?
I echo with everyone else. Like those tidbits have been huge for me learning. And I think the biggest thing is that we're problem solvers, and to not shoot down ideas and don't take it personally, because we're spitballing here and we throw things against the wall and one little piece might work. And you sometimes throw out bad ideas, and as long as the director you're working with is okay with, hey, I'm not going to take that personally. It's like, no, we're not going to use ADR for this. We're going to find a way out of it. And it's like, okay, let's do that. And so really it is being comfortable being uncomfortable, because you get stuck in holes and you got to find ways around it. And you just got to be creative and throw everything out there, all your experiences, and lean on their experiences too. So really being open-minded and not taking it personally.
Yeah. Audrey, how about you?
Everybody said like great advices, but I can think about one that I get from director and producer. One thing that comes mostly at the end of the editing process, when you're almost done, try to go chasing every single frame that you don't need in the end. Like sometimes you go chasing every cut. Sometimes it's a lot in a movie. And you go and try to considerate if you can cut 1 frame, 2 frames, maybe 3, but be very, precise till the very end. And sometimes it doesn't change the movie, but it's a very small and demanding things that make the movie more precise and that can play in the audience feeling in the end. So that's more of polishing stuff, but it's really important because that can make a very little difference, but an important one.
Yeah. Again, it reminds me of Walter Murch, because he says that like when he uses stream mode, right? He always presses spacebar at the cut, and whenever he stops at the same frame twice in a row, then he knows he's got it precisely where he wants it to be. Yeah. Anyway, Simon, the best piece of editing advice you have ever gotten?
So I like just trust in the process. Like often you look at rushes, you think, God, how on earth am I going to do something with this? How am I going to cut this scene? I'll be honest, Elísabet, when I watched Bullet Train, I've looked at it and thought, how on earth did she cut this? This is like, how on earth did you do this like spectacle? It's like, wow, how did they do that? But trust in the process, and the piece will emerge out of it. Like I see some young editors sometimes, like when they're starting out, they get a bit paralyzed by the stuff in front of them. It's like, look, just get started. If you just get started, it will happen. Because it's very hard to actually say how to do something. You just have to do it. And one thing that I'm learning, that I'm starting to think a lot more now as well, is that idea doesn't just apply to cutting a scene, but it applies to everything in our job. Like, if you want to, become an editor of films or whatever, if you want to become work on something, you kind of just have to do the work and trust that will, or you will go in the direction that you're meant to go in. Again, if you're sitting around thinking, how do I become an editor? How do I become an editor? Well, just start doing it. Just start working. So yeah, trust in the process.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know I'm guessing, because we're all human, it's petrifying when you start getting footage. It takes me a movie to learn a movie. So in the beginning, it can be extremely exhausting emotionally, because you're like, who hired me? I'm not going to be able to do this. So, but I think that's just a part of the creative process. It takes a movie to learn a movie. And so I don't think people should be, to what you're saying, Simon, people should just do it because it's going to get better the further along you get. But it's terrifying in the beginning.
And to piggyback off that, one of the other things I learned, which was helpful, was if you're going to make mistakes, make them early in your career. Really, you can mess up, you can make those mistakes. The price on that is not so heavy. So really reach out, especially when you're starting out. And that's what's important, at a certain point. Take those, we've all cut music videos or really bad short films or a webisode, and sometimes for free because we want to work with people or work with our friends. Those are the times to make mistakes. Those are the times to really get it out of your system, and then you hopefully won't repeat that on a bigger job.
Yeah, but I love mistakes. We wouldn't have popcorn without mistakes. Yeah.
I mean, a positive approach to mistakes is something that I want to embed in my son, for example, and my daughter. So, my son is learning how to count right now, and whenever he makes a mistake and gets upset, I'm it's great. You know that this is the piece that you have to practice on. It's great. Awesome. You made a mistake, right? That's the attitude. Yeah. Okay. You actually, Vashi, you did touch on the aspect, of some editors editing from the last take. And I feel like there is no right or wrong approach when it comes to your approach to editing a scene, but I'm curious about all of yours, system of editing scene, basically. How do you start that first rough cut? Do you go chronologically? Do you go from the last take to the first one? How does it go for you? What was the process? Was the most important aspect of that first initial rough cutting section for you? And we'll start from the end this time. So Simon, how about you?
Exactly as Vashi said, I sit here and I watch every frame on that screen. I try and do it away from the Avid and just take it in as a viewer, and from that, whenever I feel something, I'm making a mental note. Oh, I felt something there, right? I don't know what it is. It could be all sorts, but oh yeah, that made me feel something. And I might make notes or whatever, but I'm generally just trying to find bits that affect me or arrest me or grab me. And then I come back to my Avid, and I tend to work from the script, right? So I open the script up. I use, and I'm sure a few of you do, I use script-based editing, Avid script-based editing. So all of the clips are loaded into the script, and I just go down line by line and block it out. So I'm like, oh yeah, I know I want to be here for this bit, I know I want to be here for this bit, and just get a roughly blocked out timeline from all the memories that I had as I was watching it. And then it's just, iteration and polish from there, really, when it comes to a first pass on a scene.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Audrey, what's your approach?
To watch the rushes, it's always the same approach. I watch everything from the start to the end, but I am actively watching. I start doing some selections on the bits I like in every takes, and I make them in the order of the scene. But when I start editing, it can really depend on the type of scene it is. If it's a slow scene with, or if it's just dialogues, or if it's an action scene, it's not always the same process to start editing. It's the same process of watching and selecting, but sometimes I'm just led by a specific take or a specific moment that I really, really liked. I put black locators on the very best moments that I like when I'm into tears or when I laugh out loud or things that I really like, or an accident even maybe that is not in the other takes. But sometimes I start from the very beginning because I already know a bit how I'm gonna which kind of shot I want to begin with. And sometimes I really don't. There are so many angles. Everything is possible. So sometimes I just like with the moments that I prefer or that I noticed more in the takes. It can be in the middle of the scene, and I start from there. And what's going to be next? What's going to lead me to that moment that I very want to highlight in the scene? So it really depends. I have no rule on how I start really editing one scene.
I know it's project to project based to some extent. Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, do you have like your thing that you do?
I've tried all of them, and it's interesting to force yourself to be different. Like I forget what editor it was. I totally forget. He starts his scenes at the back. He wants to know what the landing is, and then he works backwards. Excuse me. I found I work best doing chronologically because you're building your characters and you're building the style of the film. Like you said, picking the angles. What am I going to be leaning on? What is the style of this film going to be? And it slowly develops as you're doing it. And also, the one key thing I do with cutting scenes is, what is the purpose of this scene? Make it one sentence. What are you supposed to get out of this scene? And if I can hit that, then I move on. And of course, roughing it out first. It's always going to be a fast first editor assembly, excuse me. And there's some films that are 3 hours that I cut the first take, and it's going to come down to like 90 minutes. But you got to see everything there, whether you like it or not. And I want to cut things out of the film already. You got to see everything. And that really opens up your brain to go, okay, this scene's not landing. How do we pick it apart? Why is it necessary? What is it doing to the overall picture? And it really is, those details are huge. And so really starting from the front, I feel like is really helpful in my brain for sure.
Yeah. Elísabet.
I feel so unprofessional, but I embrace chaos. And it's like, you're watching the dailies, obviously, and sometimes you have multiple cameras, you have to watch them all. And then I just get fired up because of something, and I forget to watch the rest until 2 days later, and I'm just diving in. But that's just my process. It's a bit chaotic, but obviously in the end, I've done the same as you. But it's my Achilles heel is making an assembly with everything in it, because like my whole body is just, no one would say that, and it's out. And so yeah, that's my problem. I do have a problem making a solid assemble with everything in it. But thankfully, I'm working with a director that knows me by now. So he's kind of okay with it. But yeah, it's a bit chaotic. But I agree with everyone. You have to watch everything. You have to look for the mistakes or the looks, or I've even used private dialogue that was in an end of a take. It's like nothing is not on the table.
I mean, it's so personal, I think, right? The way Mike works, the way you guys describe it, like it's so personal, I think, and like again, like on project to project based as well. And there are editors. I think I've heard Tom Cross saying that he sometimes like doesn't watch like the first few takes, but you guys as well, you have the luxury of having assistant editors, right? So people that you actually, if you delegate like some part of the process and you build the trust and give them authority to make some decisions as well, then you might actually limit that decision making process to some extent, right there. But again, it also depends on the director. I don't think Tom Cross said that when I watched the interview with him that he he does it every time like that. He said that he does it for Daniel Chazelle's movie because he knows how dumming works, right? So that's again on the point you made, Elísabet, on knowing the director and the trust that you build between one another. Super important, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I just also want to say sometimes because especially when you have really complicated scenes with a lot of characters, for example, sometimes before I watch the dailies, I just have to cut it roughly. So I just get a sense, like I have to get a sense of how many characters are there, who's talking to who, how are they talking to each other. It's just, so I roughly cut it and then I go and make my selects. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, like you say, I think it's extremely personal and nothing is right and nothing is wrong. It's just whatever suits you.
Vashi.
No, I echo everyone's sentiment so far, and especially that first step when you have a scene, you have all the footage. It is terrifying. Like, what shot do I start with? Where do I go? What do I do? One thing I've tried to do in the past with directors, especially if it's the first time working with them, is to, and again, time allowing, if you have all the footage to do this, is to find a scene or a sequence in the film that really resonates with you. It could be the last scene, it could be the middle scene, it could be an action scene, it could be a dialogue scene, somewhere where you're really familiar with it. You've really investigated that footage and you can build the shit out of it, like quickly and strongly. And then when you're comfortable, you share that with the director. And again, you're not trying to get there. You're trying to get there okay, but you're trying to say, like, I get it. Like, I feel it. Like, are you resonating with this? Is this the right path? And then if you do hit it and you do a really good job with that scene that resonates with you and also with the director, then it's a smoother runoff from that point. That's what I find. I don't like starting at the beginning because you have to start at the beginning. I'd like to find something that I really like in the script, in the scene, that has the footage and performances to match that. The powerful thing to make a keystone scene, and then you can build forward and backward from that point. And you always know that you have a strong starting point wherever that may be in the timeline.
Yeah, it works like a benchmark as well, I guess, right?
Yeah. And then technically, which I'm curious about everyone else, if I'm cutting a scene, I like to do a camera roll. I like to have all the footage on one timeline with markers at first shot of each new scene, so I can bounce between all the different shots, up arrow, down arrow to go to the next shot. And then I like to stack the timelines, use a pancake timeline to be able to put stuff underneath into a timeline so I can quickly build out, I can quickly see the last shot in a sequence, investigate that, go backwards, pull that underneath or in and out it. And then I want to build quickly. I don't want to take too much time on that first pass in terms of fine tuning the points themselves. I want to just get something up on its legs if I can, and then see what's going on and then address any issues. But I like to cut quickly and then analyze it like as a second person.
Yeah.
Like one builder and then one looker.
I think like so many times that the analogy with writers is suits here as well. Like a writer also, like you want to be in that writer mode, and there will be time to be in editor mode, right, on that text that you have written as well. And I think it applies to editing like greatly. Jacob, I'm very curious about your answer because like you're the one that mostly does documentary work. So I'm curious about your approach to scene editing.
Sure. I will talk about that. And I'll give a really, really recent example. I came on as an editor of a documentary that has a pretty rough cut. I wasn't involved until then. It was made by the directors, and I've agreed to come on as editor. So I've seen the film, but they acknowledge it's super rough. There's all sorts of issues that need to be solved, but I have a pretty general understanding of what the story is, even though we all know that a lot of things have to move around. And so in terms of a decision about what to cut first, I just chose a scene that I liked. Because I know there's all sorts of really painful, difficult structural stuff that I'm going to have to get to, but I need to like give myself this reward of like, well, I just want to see this scene really sing, because I know that it can be a lot more than what it is, and we all know. So it's like, okay, give myself a little bit of candy before I have to go do the stuff that's just going to be rough, So, and then within a scene, it is, different, because in this case, and this is a very common thing for a verite documentary, this scene's about 35 minutes long, single camera, 2 people talking, and that's it. And the scene is going to end up being maybe 3.5 minutes. And so you're actually just figuring out like, well, what are they going to say? What's going to happen? And in this case, it's a story about a young man who watched his younger brother be run over by a car when he was very young, when he was like 8. and he's kind of never been the same. He's never really recovered from the trauma, but he's an incredibly creative artist, and we see him struggle throughout high school and try to kind of master his demons and sort of master life. So this is a scene in which he's making an apology to this girl that was a friend, and then they had a little romantic entanglement. He's basically been kind of awful to her, and he's acknowledging the fact that this is the case. So I know this, and the first thing that I'm thinking of is like, how do I feel about this guy? Because I know like that there's all sorts of complexity in this scene, and essentially we need to be on his side. We need to feel like he's a good person, essentially. And I know based on the rest of the film that we do root for him, and yet he's he's kind of done these really kind of crappy things, and he's really trying his best to make this apology, and it doesn't really go all that well. And there's a kind of a darkly comedic aspect to it too, because after he finishes this long flailing apology, and he says, "So do you feel any better about things?" And she has a long pause, and she says, "Not really." It's like, I was really looking forward to that, because I found it, just very true. But anyways, I'm really thinking a lot about how do I feel about these characters. So as I'm going, I like to just do a string out. So everything is in the scene in the string out. Then I make a duplicate of that, and these are going to be my first selects. And I work by subtraction. I just take things out, take things out, take things out, take things out. And then I have to watch them all again. And then I can, to get to a place where it's manageable as, all right, well, now I can think about it as a scene. And from there, it became clear to me that it was really important that we get to see the emotion on his face as he made this apology, because without that, it could feel very insincere. And there's this one close-up shot in which you can see the emotions really ripple on his face. Other than that, if you see it from wider and the other stuff that happens, I was worried that it was going to be too, like we weren't going to know him. We weren't going to feel him really. So there are just things that you pick up on in terms of the narrative logic of how it's going to have to work. And then all sorts of things, when does he say what? And you just have to try a bunch of things out. But a lot of it is, how do I feel about these people on screen? And that is affected by everything. But you do get hints and intuitions about things. And then it's just trying stuff out and, workshopping it and trying it every which way. But so much of it, like any of the other editing that you do in scripted, you're just like, what's coming off on the screen, as one of you said. What am I feeling about this? And kind of going with that as a really important part of it.
It all comes down to emotion, yeah. The last question from me in that section, in that part, is about staying fit in the edit bay, because I feel like it's the big part of what we should be doing. I know that's something that I have to get better at. So I wonder if you, with your experience, if you have, some things that you do to stay fit during the working days, the long working days. Yeah. So Jacob.
Wait, fed or fit?
Fit. So basically,
fit. Okay.
Physically
not
fit.
the same question, because it can be yes to one and no to the other one.
Okay, good. Fit. How to stay fit. All right.
I turned 50 not too long ago, and I work fewer hours than I used to a day. I think this is probably just because I'm getting older. It's also because I think I've gotten better and quicker at things. And so I think I don't need as many hours to get the same work done that I used to. And I think it's really important to monitor yourself so that you don't, because to me, it's a lot better to quit when I'm just not seeing it. It's just clear that I'm not really, like the productivity is down. And I'm actually, even for the sake of the film, I'm better off just calling it quits for the day and starting the next day than I am trying to push myself to something for 2 or 3 more hours. It's just not smart, And I used to be someone who worked, I was the opposite of that. But I feel like I've partly just getting older, partially getting smarter about sort of seeing myself from afar and figuring out what's the best way for me to do this. And then, also learning that I am definitely a morning person. I really am. Some people work great at night, they're not a morning, but you kind of like for me, I know that the best thinking I'm going to do is going to be before lunch. And so I start early. I try to get a lot done before lunch, and then some done in the couple hours after that. And after that, if anything happens, it's all gravy. So hopefully I work with people who are okay with that.
Perfect. Vashi.
Staying fit, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. So for me, I've been, an athlete my whole life. My father played in the National Hockey League. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I played professionally for 10 years. So that component of the life, the physical component, has always been there. And obviously transitioning when I retired from hockey to being a full-time editor, it's a huge shift in terms of every capacity of physically you're not moving, too much if you're just editing straight. The interaction with people gets removed. You're not part of a 20-person team that's literally interacting all day long. Coming from an aggressive sport to be an editor where you're communicating with people and you can't come off as aggressive and on edge, and that whole kind of professional athlete or pro, that mindset that helps you in a sports environment is detrimental in a environment of editing and a collaborative environment where we should be nurturing, we should be helping each other, being inquisitive and whatnot. So I did have to flip a switch, and it took a while to not take things personally in terms of someone says something, you're like, oh, fuck that. No, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. Instead of, how about listen for a second? How about ingest it, think about it, don't just lash out and respond, which is what was normal for me before in a different environment. So staying fit is just me, trying to keep those hours shorter if possible, get to a point where I'm happy with my day, and then get out. Like knowing that I've accomplished something, some sense of good, and then moving on, and then going for a hike or going to go play tennis or go play hockey or do something to try and get a sweat or to just try and shake it up, break up the day. Obviously on deadlines and certain projects, you're just buried, the last 2 weeks of a feature before you lock it or before you have to turn it over are always pure chaos, both good and bad. You're getting closer. They're going to take it away. You're in bed thinking of ideas. I got to try that as soon as I get in because it's critical and I can make a difference. So the work-life balance is hard to maintain, especially at the end of a project, more so than the beginning or when you're getting your feet wet or getting through it. But I think it's incumbent upon us to try and give ourselves some kind of other activity, even if it's just to break up the day, even if it's just sitting outside under a tree, and that's not necessarily doing pull-ups on the tree, but just doing something to break it up, to try and reset your brain a couple times a day. And ideally, trying to get exercise if possible. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Elísabet, what's your take on it?
Oh yeah, I'm right there with Jacob, and also what Vashi was saying. But yeah, I think it's extremely important to take good care of yourself. I learned it the hard way, completely crashed 5 years ago, stage 4 cancer. Pretty sure that was just stress, the stress of it all, lack of sleep, all of that.
Yeah.
So I don't do more than 10 hours. And I've always been careful. Well, I don't do more than 9 hours, really. I do 10 hours if I can send my assistants home at the same time. But we have to also, I feel like we have a responsibility because our assistants, they stay usually like an hour after us. So I think that's something we have to think about and take care of. They usually turn up before us and they leave after us. And I think it's so important to also not forget that you are responsible of their health as well. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons I don't spend too much time in the editing room. And I agree with Jacob. I'm 57. I think I have the experience of doing things in a shorter time. I'm less nervous than I was when I was younger, if I was doing the right thing or how to do it. And I'm not saying that you're just going through the emotions, and I don't think that was what Jacob was saying. I think I just have more confidence to make decisions faster, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But take care of yourself, for crying out loud. It's like, it's not worth your life.
Yeah, exactly. It's worth reiterating.
Nothing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also just take care of your crew, because I think it's extremely important. They do work more.
there's two things. One is the misconception of you have to be in a dark room to edit. Because every time I have a window, I don't feel trapped. I feel like I can look outside, you see nature, because a lot of times I'm at the computer and hours whiz by and I have no idea if it's light or dark outside, and being able to see nature while you're cutting is huge. And getting, your setup the way you want it. Like, I like to be clean. I want to be able to find what I need right away in the application and on my desk. And so those two things. And then one key one I've learned over the last couple of films is, once you get a couple versions done of your film, is to walk away for a week. It's possible. It's possible, because we become so blinded of certain details I'm always looking for. Some joke I know it's going to land, and it just whizzes right over you. You walk away a week, and especially audience previews too, where you get tons of feedback that you never would have found yourself. And doing that, you come back, and as soon as I watch the cut, when I come back, I have a notebook full of notes, and I know I can do this better. And it's just one of those things where you're like, I'm on a great track, but now I just took it to the next level. And so really keeping that and realizing, like what you guys have said, is when I'm not making good progress, walk away. I'll start early tomorrow. I know I'm going to be thinking about it before I go to bed. I know I can't turn it off. It's art. There is no final cut to a film. You will keep going because you're an artist. And so I can't spin my head down half the time. So it's that transition point of edit to bed is sort of like, I got to slow my mind down, but things are going to pop in. And it's so weird how it happens, but it's also those aha moments in the random points of your life that are just like, that was huge.
Wow. I love this. I feel like, the role that subconscious mind plays in creative process is undervalued. So I love it.
And with that is also trusting your gut, where you're sitting there and you're like, something doesn't seem right. And you're like, okay, then I know I need to attack this, and don't be afraid of, or don't feel like you're getting to a point where you're like over it, because that's where you just got to keep going and pushing and be like, does this feel correct? And it's really weird how all of a sudden it's that click of, my gut is really pointing me into the right direction, and trust it.
Yeah. Audrey, how about you? Staying fit. What do you do?
Yeah, I agree about the importance of the breaks, whether it's for holidays or if it's just lunch breaks. I already worked with an English director, an American director, and I'm working with a French team, always working in France. And both of them, they were surprised that we took every day, almost every day, 1 hour break lunch, because they were thinking that we should just eat a sandwich in front of the computer while having the mouse and the keyboard in the same hands. But it's not possible, and it's not losing your time to just take 1 hour break for having good food and staying with your team and talking about sometimes everything else than the movie or the project that you're working on. And you come back from the break and you have a fresher mind. So I think it's important. And for holidays, last year, the movie I cut, we had to make forced break because of COVID, and the shooting was not complete. So we couldn't really finish the movie. We were missing the beginning and the end of the movie, which are very important to draw everything else. So we had a break for 2 months, holidays, summer. We came back with my director and we're like, okay, so now we don't care about everything we did before. We are not emotionally attached to the editing we did together. Let's go starting again some scenes, new ideas. And I think this is one of the best editing that I completed because of that, thanks to that break, because it was really helpful creatively. Also to draw the characters better, for her to know, my director, which story she really wanted to tell. So breaks are really important. And sometimes staying too much at work and not stopping doesn't make you work better. Working more doesn't mean you work better, I think. So, yeah, agree.
Yeah,
with
that's
what
true.
you said.
That's true. The time doesn't like equal quality of work. Like it doesn't. It's obvious.
No,
I
not
think,
at all.
right? Yeah, yeah. Simon, how about you? What do you do to stay fit?
Like my first answers would have been, a lot of what you guys have said. I try and take holidays. I definitely finish the day early. I'm never really working into the evening. So for something different, that like one show that I worked on, and I was on it for about a year. I took up meditation on that show, so I would do transcendental meditation, and I loved it. Like it was so good. It just like made my head and my mind feel so clean and clear. So if ever anyone wants to experiment with that, like it totally worked for me. And that's like 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, and it's just quite focused, like mantra meditation. At the moment, the thing that I'd say I do most, and if I don't do it, I get like itchy and like I know I'm not working right. Is actually I go to the cinema. Like I absolutely love the cinema. I try and go to the cinema, or I do go to cinema at least once a week. I think this week, I think I've sat in a cinema like 4 times this week and watched films, and that is for me like my happy place, my sensory, room. So finding it doesn't have to be a cinema. I mean, it's specific, like really good for film editors, but finding something that you like doing that you can just go and do and have as your your escape is is super helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that, like, the thing that we do love is cinema, so we should like at least I know that I have forgotten about it in the past. Like, so I've been to the festival a few weeks ago, and like, wow, it felt so amazing to just spend the time in the cinema theater, like so amazing. And I realized I missed this time so much, since COVID outburst. I didn't have much time in the theater. So anyway, I'm getting off the tangent here, but I
Just one more point there.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
We just saw The Fabelmans, and it was really kind of a spark for me because it was like, discovering what you love to do and how much it takes and the work-life balance and all of that. And so that was kind of a nice little energizer for me, and never really seen that on film before, sort of how much goes into it and how you can't turn it off. And it's really sort of, it re-engaged me again. And so it was really nice to see that in such an experience.
Yeah, Fablemans are amazing. Yeah. I can see Anne-Marie saying that Vashi and she have been waiting to see it, right, Vashi? Yeah. I wanted to ask this question about staying fit because I feel like it's the topic that we don't discuss enough. At least that's my impression. I feel like it should be a bigger part of what we think about actively. I think that's why that's the reason why Zach Arnold and what he does is like a big gift to the editing community, because he highlights those caring about your health aspects so much. So just wanted to bring it out. By the way, I can see that people in the chat will come back to the chat later in the third section, but I can see that some of them say that they use standing desk as well. I'm a standing desk proponent as well. I used to spend like 60% of my working time standing. These days, unfortunately, it's more like 20%, but it's still better than nothing, I guess. Anyway, so I want to transition to you. So I've got some specific questions for you, but first you might also have questions between one another. So if you want to start,
Simon, I watched Chernobyl, and I was it was such a powerful series for me. It was really I think it was for an awards thing, and I actually watched the last episode first, which made me want to go start it, But I don't know, will you just talk about working on that? Because so many of things about that were, I really, really appreciated the pacing. It was such an interesting experience for it to be on one level actually quite gentle and relaxing, and yet the content is so incredibly tense, right? There is so much tension and so much dread and so much action in these frames, which are, you know, sometimes doing very little. So anyways, I don't know. I just wanted to ask you about your experience working on that.
Oh, thanks so much, Jacob. Chernobyl was the job where I meditated every day, so that's how I got through it.
Yes,
how I got
yes.
through Chernobyl.
It definitely like penetrated my, you know, I felt like I was having like dreams about it.
Yeah. Your friend you mentioned, Elizabeth, is Hilda? Is it Hilda who's your friend? Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
she's incredible. The
She's
composer.
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, like, I was so lucky to have, you know, been part of that and to have landed on that. And I think maybe one of the, like, now looking back, I'm so glad that we didn't really know what was going to happen with it when we were making it. Like, this was a series about Chernobyl. Like, it could have, it was always, I think it would have always turned out the same, but it could have hit or it could have not hit. You know, it depends. Like, some things don't hit in the way that they do, and I think I would have been like, you know, absolutely paralyzed if I'd known then like how it was going to turn out. And I think I was just like, you know, so lucky to just be working with those people, like you know, Johan Renck and Craig Mazin, and Jane Featherstone, who was like the exec in the UK, who I kind of knew before I got the job. I'm just surrounded by people like who I would say have like the best taste, and it's a taste that I really share and really fall into. So, you know, when I would see the rushes, I would be like, oh, I really like this. You know, this is really my the kind of thing that I would love to watch. And I've been super fortunate to have worked on a bunch of things, you know, that I've loved, but that one really did, you know, play to my particular tastes in film. But like one of my favorite films before that and still now and like was JFK, you know, and I kind of felt that there was an element of that in that process, you know, especially the court case at the end. So yeah, like my mantra on that job, like I didn't know how big it would be, but I did know it was important. So my mantra every day when I'd go in is like, don't fuck this up, you know, like do the work, don't mess it up, don't have a, you know, unnecessary argument, or don't upset anybody. Like just try and keep your head down and do the work and do it the best you can, and don't mess this up. So yeah, but yeah, no, thank you so much, Jacob. That's really kind of you to say. Really kind of you to say.
By the way, Simon, it's interesting that the one of the leading actors from Chernobyl actually is in Andor as well, right? And again, one of the main actors in it. So is it like an accident, like a coincidence? Sorry, or
so it's the same fantastic producer. So the producer of Chernobyl, Sanna Wallenberg, she was the producer of Andor. That's how I got on the job. And, you know, she kind of took onto Andor a team of people, the production designer, Luke Hull, casting, I think costumes, I think the VFX editor, the assembly editor, the assistant editor, a lot of the actors, like not just Stellan, but there's like 4 or 5 actors who were all big, you know, Chernobyl people. So that, I think that really comes down to Sanna's taste and Sanna's relationship with all of us, where she just will call us up and say, do you want to come and do this next thing with us? So that's, you know, that's really lovely. Yeah, and Stella, yeah, so I've been able to edit, I've been fortunate enough to edit quite a few amazing Stellan Skarsgård monologues. That's a career treat. Absolute career treat. I guess if if Jacob, if it was very kind of you to ask me, Piotr, should we just go round? Should we take
go
turns
ahead.
and
Go ahead.
I'll ask the next one. So I guess I saw Bullet Train in the cinema, Elizabeth, and like it blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I looked you up and I read about your editing and and your kind of journey with that film, and I find it I'm in awe. And I guess my question, to Chernobyl, you on the other hand, on that film, you've got Brad Pitt in it. Like, you know what you're working on. You know what this is. So how is that? How is going into work and being like, oh shit, I'm on like a Brad Pitt film? Like that's kind of the opposite of my Chernobyl experience. So how was that?
Well, I kind of got the experience. Like, I was on Keanu Reeves movie. I was on Charlize Theron movie and Ryan Reynolds movie. It kind of builds up. So it's like, yeah, whatever. No, joke. No, it was
You're
fun.
the star, Elizabeth. You're the star of that film.
Oh, yeah. I don't think so. But thank you.
Oh, you are,
I
you are.
appreciate my editor saying so. But I think it comes to who said it before, like just working with people that make you look good. I mean, that's so amazing. And I've just been so blessed, like working with, and even like a director like David Leitch, he makes you look really, really good. Also because he's so open to you experimenting. He's so open for you to try different things. And that's a blessing. Working with a director that it doesn't keep what's in the can sacred. You can play with it, you can turn it around, you can try different things. And everything they shoot, Jonathan Sellas and my photography, I mean, everything they shoot is beautiful. So yeah, it's a blessing working with people like that and being allowed to play. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
But I really want to go back to Jacob because I admire documentary editors because I've done documentary myself. I don't think I could do one now, to tell you the truth, because it takes a lot of training just going through the amount of material, and you don't really have a script. You have an idea, but you kind of have to follow the material. And I was blown by that documentary. It cost me 2 days in furious anger and sorrow, but I don't mind paying that. I thought it was a great documentary. Thank you. I didn't have a question, did I? But yeah, I mean, do you
Thank you.
meditate on it?
Thank you very much. That's wonderful.
Actually, I have a question about missing in Brooks County. You have like the main storyline, the family that you're following, right? And I was just thinking, like, did you have another families which story you followed, stories you filmed? And if you did, like, what was that decision-making process when deciding which one to focus on?
So for those of you who haven't heard of it, it's a story about 2 different families who go searching for their loved ones who've disappeared in this area of South Texas. And then there's a lot of peripheral stuff that happens around those stories. And there were 3. There were 3 ones there were more that they followed, but there were really only 3 that were potential storylines. And actually one of them got dropped relatively early. It was just clear that it wasn't, there were just things that weren't, that there wasn't enough for us to understand what was happening with what had been shot, basically. So we really did just have 2. But it is enormously difficult. Because there's this, I think this is not all that different from it's not different in, it's different maybe in degree. I don't think it's different in kind from editing on most scripted things, but there's some place that I've always feel like it's this mountain that you're climbing, And there's the place where where basically where the structure has been figured out, where you can finally kind of like exhale, and you know that you basically, like, more or less the film, like, yes, there's tons of work to do, etc., but you basically know the story you're telling, but like that could be 2/3 of the edit time getting to there. So that could be like, out of like 25 weeks, that could be 2/3 of that. And that is really hard because you're living in this sort of uncertainty, and essentially most of the rough cuts don't really work, and so I think that's where experience is really helpful, because you don't freak out. You know that you're going to get there because you've seen enough of the footage to you just have to take it on faith that you are gonna find a way to be able to retain the audience's attention. In documentaries, you're often trying to sort of teach people things, even when it's even if it's not an issue-oriented film. You still have to kind of like get some basic facts out to the audience, and sometimes you have to kind of say things 2, 3, 4 times in various ways, whether it's a title card or even just people getting to know what the characters' names are. Sometimes you're just getting the names said, there's things like that. So there's all sorts of things you have to cover, and you have to trust the process even more so than you might on a scripted thing, because you are living for a very long period of time in rough cut screenings for things that don't work.
That's painful.
It's very painful.
How long did it take to edit it?
So it was about 28 weeks all together. Although really the last, like, a lot of that at the end was really nitpicky, like sort of technical stuff. So I'd say more like 22, 24 weeks, although over a much longer period of time. And what's interesting is it's a sprawling story. There's a lot in it. There's, but it's 81 minutes. It doesn't need to be any longer, it's so, and that is something I think you also get better at as you get more experienced, is no, like, we can actually just let this go. Like, it's, it's amazing how much, when you're willing to do that, with my students, I'm always, what is the most direct path to this idea? Because it can be usually, the first iterations I have my scenes are overcomplicated. They're like, there's too much in them. There's, and it's, of course, you sort of do need to put it out there so that you can take it away. But even without, so I'm not immune to that, and it's part of the process. But keeping in mind that sort of directness and figuring out how taking things out can lead to something that can be just as emotionally complex, but not so many different hits on the audience's brain that you're just asking them to do things that they can't reasonably do.
Interesting. I was thinking about, editors. Yes, we're the storytellers. Our hands are on everything. We're supposed to be invisible, but we're not. All this back and forth bullshit. Like, I always think editors have a certain style. There's some substance to them where it carries over onto the screen. And I was talking with Simon the other day. I was watching Andor, and I was watching, I believe, episode 9 or 10. And at the end, the credits come up. And the whole time I'm like, Simon, cut this. Like, I just sensed it. It was just, I felt it. And a name comes up. I got chills just now. Like, his name comes up. I'm like, fucking, of course it was Simon. Like, and I had watched Chernobyl. I had known him and met him through that. I'm watching this, and it just really struck me that the editing wasn't radically different from anything else, but there was some personal touch of him as a human being, his past experiences, how he approaches life, that carried through the edit to me on the receiving end. So I was just wondering, have you watched something or had an experience where you're watching it, you're like, I know who cut that, or you have this sensation, like, if I watch a Dede Allen film, I know I'm watching a Dede Allen film. Doesn't matter who the director is, doesn't matter what the actual narrative is or what genre it is. I feel her. It comes across. So I wanted to ask quickly, anyone who can jump in, is there someone you watch that just stands out? Or the other question is, do you have a style? Or is there something about you that you try and impart into your work that makes you different, while keeping it invisible, of course?
I mean, I'd love to respond in regards to Andor. One thing that was really it would be quite hard to work out what that is that Vashi's talking about for myself. Like, what is it like that is going on there? But when I came onto Andor, the nature of the filming was that some of my scenes had already been shot before I came on. and there were a couple of other editors who had assembled those scenes together who were working on other episodes at the time. I also have an assistant or an assembly editor who I work with a lot. So he'd, throughout the process, he'd cut a bunch of scenes, and I would often give him scenes to cut, even if I'd already cut them. I'd be like, "Can you go and cut the scene? Don't watch mine. You go and cut it, and then I'll nick the good bits." And like with these other versions, I would never watch them before I'd cut my version, but then I would go and compare, and I totally agree, like that. I reckon I can pull any scene out of that 12 episode series, and I can go, yeah, I know that Hazel cut that one. I know that John cut that one. I know that Yang cut that one. So it is interesting that has come about. For me, the editor that like just I know he cut it and it's superb is Joe Walker. Like Joe Walker's stuff is so brilliant, and the the sound work and the elegance and the just the level of just absolute artistry and talent in his work. I feel I can feel it, and you know what was really funny? Like I watched a short film called The Slapper or something, Slapper. And he cut that before he cut 12 Years a Slave. He cut that before anything. And it was so, like, I was watching it thinking, wow, the editing in this is really great. I love this editing. And then to see at the end Joe Walker come up, I was like, wow, that was Joe Walker that cut that. So yeah, I it's hard to, write down what those ingredients are or what that is, but I totally get what you're saying and appreciate that as well. Thank you.
I felt something different about episode 9 as I watched it of Andor. So I didn't think like, okay, that's Simon's episode for sure because of the way it's cut, but I felt something different about it. So there is something to it. But I also want to touch on the point that I've listened to from Craig Mazin, actually, the writer of Chernobyl, right? He was asked on his podcast, Script Notes, how do you develop, how did he develop his writing style, right? Or something like that, right? And he said, I don't know. If I would know, I wouldn't like to know. Something like that, something along the lines. Because basically, the moment you realize what's so special about your style is the moment you probably spoil it. And you probably cannot have it anymore. So I think sometimes the blessing is in not knowing what makes the your approach, your specific approach to something unique. That uniqueness factor should be kind of like mystery, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm just trying to steal the soul of everyone else's skill set and put it into mine. So that's why I'm asking these probing questions.
If I could piggyback on that a little bit, it's interesting because I've cut commercials, films, docudrama, reality TV, and documentaries. And so it's really kind of interesting to sort of keep your brain on brand of what you're doing and at the same time crossing over a little bit and sort of seeing when I was working with Sean Baker, I can always tell it's his because it feels almost like a documentary. Mm-hmm. And I took that with me, and a lot of my stuff I've realized I've slowed things down immensely. I've sort of gone back into the old films of like the old Westerns and stuff where they're long takes, but they mean something and it gives the audience time to breathe and to think. And so that really sort of changed my style, but at the same time, from project to project, some things really do call themselves out. And that's what I was going to ask you, Vashi, because I know you do the same thing. You're jumping from project to project to project. How do you handle that? How do you approach it? Do you feel sort of a different approach with the directors and whoever it is, if it's an agency? Because I know that's a different experience entirely, is working with a group of people that all have conflicting notes. And so you go, what am I supposed to do?
I could tell you that. I'll tell you a quick story about an agency job. I did a Volkswagen campaign, like 460s, 430s, 415s. But the bigger point is that I like to challenge myself by taking on a feature and then cutting commercials, cutting something else where I'm using a different skill set, different muscle group, where I get to experiment and try new techniques on those commercials. and on those shorter projects that I can then translate into feature films if they fit or if they do. But I get to play a little bit, and it is a completely different mindset where you're turning over 7 spots or 8 spots in 5 days, for like the Volkswagen, for example. And so I like to challenge myself because I don't want to, I don't want to cut for 10 months and then take 2 weeks off and cut for 10 months on another feature. I can't. I want to be very selective with the projects I take on. My time is limited. My energies are limited. So that's a huge commitment on any project that you take. And I'm luckily in a place where I don't have to take every job because I have to take every job because I have that need. And so I'm trying to be more selective, which is critical for my well-being, mental, physical, everything. But on the commercial, I'll tell you a real fast story. In the agency room, I cut 4 30-second VW ads. I showed it to a room of 20 executives, and on each one, every single person had a note. And on the first 30-second spot, we had 55 iterations. On the second one, there were 60. On the third one, there was 46. On the fourth one, there was like 59. And on each one, every person in the room, from the agency to the creatives to the producers, they all wanted to just say a note. So they were like, I contributed. That's why the notes were coming. And so everyone's saying, flop that shot or speed ramp that down by 25%, just to say it out loud. And then at the end of the day, the first 3 versions I did, 3 of those first 3 versions was the final on these 30-second spots. The fourth one was like iteration 6. So we never got out of the first 8. So the work was done before they even came in the room because I looked at the sides, I looked at the storyboards, I matched everything, I made it flow, I made it feel good. I showed them, but it was all the corporate bullshit of, we need to put our fingers on this. We need to seem important in the room. We're in Santa Monica for a week. We're going for dinner tonight. We gotta give them notes to shake it up, and then we'll come back and do it again. And the funniest part, or not funniest part, but the worst part was that campaign was the VW one where they were lying about the diesel emissions and stuff. So it ran for like 2 weeks, and then VW got sued for like $3 billion. But the spots were good. They were convincing and fun.
It's funny you say that because I learned from a producer a long time ago. He was an editor way, way before my time. And he had the thing, he coined it as calling it the hairy armpit, where you leave one blaring mistake in your edit so that the agency, the clients can be like, there's something wrong there. And then everything else usually goes smooth. And so it really was, it's almost hard to do that because I want to have everything as good as best as it can be. But it's a weird technique to think of because you're working with a lot of different people with a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different experiences, and everybody wants to be a chef in the kitchen. I guess another question sort of open with everybody is, how do you guys deal with all these different feedback? Because the first thing I usually ask when I'm about to be hired is, how many chefs are in the kitchen and who gets final cut? Because I need to know what game I'm playing here. I've had a film where there's six EPs that want to say, and the director wants to say, director thinks he has final cut, but he doesn't. So then there's this war between these factions, and I'm stuck in the middle of it. I wonder if anyone's been in sort of that area before.
I've been in a room where the producers and the director weren't even making the same movie. I actually think people should have to sign up on what movie they're making before they make it. But I think respect takes you a long way, because in the end, everyone, from every single producer to directors to editors to audience in a test screening, everyone is there to help you. We kind of all want to make a good movie, So you have to be respectful. And I think it's also experience. Just have I would throw up. 10 years ago, I was throwing up while we were screening a movie. I'm not there still, So you just learn to take all those notes and use what's good and throw the rest away. I think that's the only way to deal with it, but always respectfully. If I'm told a note, I'm always like, that's a great note. You have to embrace it. Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, I'll do what I can. Yeah, I'm going to go through the material, and you do your diligence. Weren't you talking about this before? Try everything.
Yeah.
It's the worst part of the editing process for me, but try everything. Is that a real note? Is someone just trying to be helpful? But try it. See.
Audrey, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to say that as experience grows, I remember on the first movies that I cut, when we were happy with the director's cut, I was feeling like it was almost the end of the editing. And every time new notes were coming in, I was so tired already that it was really hard to try to figure it out, to find the energy to do that, and to be honest enough to agree with some of these notes, because sometimes when you're too tired, it's agree to be honest with yourself and to try to hear what people are telling you. So now when we are about to show the movie to the distributors, to the producers, or even to the test screening, I'm trying to mindset myself to this is a new beginning. Just try to refresh your energy, because this is a new start in the process and not the end. It's a new start, and this is really helpful because I go through these steps easierly, I don't know what to say, than I used to. So not consider the end of the process too soon because it's always longer than you originally imagined.
It's like with the naming convention, right? Just stick to the version, don't put final in there.
Exactly. Exactly. Never put final anymore.
And if you work with Marvel, they might be shooting a new scene while you're mixing the movie. It's like there is no.
I know that
premiere.
with Netflix also does the same. I mean, even when you think this is completely over, like grading is done, VFX are done, music is done, mixing is done, reshoot. Okay, so let's go back. It's never finished until it's on the air.
But let's ask you, Audrey, about European sensibility, because
yes,
it happened a lot that I was hired for the European sensibility, and then the studios were always, "Oh my God, that's too European. We can't do that." Like dial back on it. Do you meet that?
No, I don't think I did. Honestly, I mean, I started with in the movie industry. I started with foreign directors, but now I'm working with French directors. Sometimes it's international project, but the whole team almost is French. I don't really feel the difference in the way my work is perceived, actually. Honestly, I would say no to this question, because nobody ever told me in my work that I was too European. In my way of living, sometimes, yeah, of course. I was talking about lunch breaks and stuff like that, or I don't know, like my character, my reactions to something sometimes, or cultural stuff, like sometimes on American movies, or on the first movie that I cut was 3 Days to Kill. It was McG that directed it, and I went to New York and in New Jersey to do a test screening in a big mall, in a big theater, and I had never experienced a theater movie in America. And before the screening started, I said to McG, be careful, because while we are doing screenings, we already did with some of the producers, you're always talking to me while the screening is happening. Please don't speak to me to not disturb the audience. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And I understood 5 minutes after the movie started, everybody was shouting, eating, and it was a real cultural gap, because in France we are mostly very silent in movies. So it was really funny to go through that experience. And after the movie, when the movie stopped, he looked at me and he was just kidding me because I was just so ridiculous and stupid because I didn't know what would happen with the audience.
No, but I do find it interesting also just the difference between European and American, and I respect both of them, productions, because in America, we're always using someone's private money, basically, while in Europe, it's more of a film, like a taxpayer thing. So it really changes the focus a tiny bit. I mean, I feel like the focus in America is very audience orientated, and I do that. And
it starts to change in France. I guess we are more copying America in the movie industry because we used to have the French independent movies where directors were all powerful over producers and distributors, but it really changes this past year.
It has changed the creative producer title. There are more creative producers. There used to be just producers. Now there are creative, but the financing of the film is the same, hasn't changed. It's still film fund based, no?
You have different fund base. You have private money, of course, private producers like studios, and it's a mix. And you mostly have TV channels attached to the production. If a producer wants to start to finance and go greenlight a movie to start the pre-production, you need to have a TV channel that puts money in it. Because it's not enough, and you sometimes have money from the state, like the CNC, which is the National Center of Cinematography of cinema, but you don't especially need that to produce a movie. But if you are a producer or a studio all by yourself, it's not really working. So it's a balance, it's a mix.
A blend of it. Interesting.
I'll just jump in for a moment. We'll transition to the Q&A section in a moment. So for all the people in the audience, prepare your questions. It would be best if the questions would be specific. I mean, like directed to someone specific, so that we, so that the person can answer. Also, people in the chat, if there is someone that would like to call in, now is the time to click the button at the bottom of the screen. You will have to type in your question, but you can just do it in one sentence. You don't have to describe everything. It's just like a draft, basically. And then we'll let you in a moment. So just wait on it. And by the way, Audrey, I don't know if you have to leave. You did mention to me a while ago that you might have to leave a little bit earlier. So
no, that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
My friend is coming tomorrow in Paris,
cool.
So I don't have to host nobody tonight.
Okay, cool. And by the way, one last thing before I forget, I just wanted to thank Ricardo, because Ricardo is the hidden hero here. He manages the chat and things like
Ricardo.
that. So yeah, he greets you as well.
Go, Ricardo.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we can continue, and we'll transition to the Q&A section.
Can I ask Mike just while we wait, because I'm so fascinated by your movies and the pace of them and the use of music and sound and all of that. So how much do you rely on music and sound to provoke those moments of terror?
I initially wanted to get into this industry to direct music videos when music videos made money, and they had money. They no longer did, so I pivoted. And so when I first started, I relied so heavy on music for a first cut, and it led me down the wrong hole. I became so beat orientated, and so I finally backed off, get a cut done. I do a lot of sound effects pre-building, so they know the ideas of what I want, where, timing, and music. It's interesting. I've got a Spotify playlist that if something comes up, I chuck it into a music ideas for film. And from there, it's sort of the tonality and how, for me, and that's part of the Chernobyl, which the music was just, oh my God. It was, just hearing those electromagnetometers, I think, hearing that click, and it's just like all of a sudden the hair is raising up and you're just, it blends, and it's an extra sense, and it puts so much to these pieces. And I'll never forget first working with Sean Baker, and he was like, there's going to be no music in the film on Florida Project. And he broke down and had one for the opening, but then everything else is basically created audio that he made for every single scene. What's on the TV in the background, what's the music in the hotel, and all those things. And so you're really creating this sort of environment for the audience to drop into. And it's that extra level. I just love hearing a beat or a chord pull when someone's looking out into the open, or you're basically conveying that there's turmoil inside. And so it's a fine line, because you can go down the wrong road, which I've done before. You yank it, they put in another piece of music, and it actually works. And I've seen this where they do a complete replace, and my edit is still solid, and it's actually hitting exactly the way I wanted it. So it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and it's having, like you said before,
Powerful thing, right? It absolutely disguise bad editing.
and also having faith in your crew. We're hiring a composer because they're the best at that. I'm not, and that's where it's really trusting everybody. With the guys building the sound effects, they go, this is scratch. This is just to give you ideas because you guys are going to kill it. And so really just trusting people, and why wouldn't you, Yeah.
No, but I also, if I want to know if something is well edited, and I've done it with all of you, you all pass, but it's about watching it without sound. If you get the story and the emotions and everything with no sound, it's actually, it's well done. Like, it's probably the only way I know how to realize if it's a good edit, or is it, there's, because it's a cooperation, which I love. Like, it's like everyone coming together, and it's like, how do you isolate one part of the mastery of all those people working on it?
Since we're talking about music and whatnot, are any of you editors, are you musicians? Like, you raise your hand if you're a musician, like any kind of instrument, or a drummer, guitar, or something. Yeah, I always find, because and what instrument? Because I play guitar, and I find that my whole life I find there's rhythms in musicianship that obviously translate over. But I'm curious if anyone else is a musician, and if that carries over into your work in terms of giving you an internal rhythm that you can apply.
I'm not a musician, but I am a music lover, and I think editing is the way that I try to be a musician. It's the closest thing that I know how to do it. Because and if I talk about editing that I enjoy, it's always musical in some way, even if there's no music, right? But the feeling of watching a scene feels just confident and musical somehow. It might be really dissonant music, or it might be, but you're being thrust through time and space in some way that is really tactile and yeah. So I think I completely agree. There's such a connection.
But I don't think you have to learn an instrument, but you can be a music lover or a dancer. That's my like rhythm background, so to say. So I think there are various ways to get there.
By the way,
well, it's the same. You're counting, dance or music. You're counting, So.
I know, exactly. So that's what I mean. It's like the rhythm, but just a different way. Yeah.
Mike, I actually want to ask a question about Hypochondriac as well, because I feel like you have. That's something that actually I discussed with Simon on his when I did a podcast episode with him. I think you have developed a very interesting grammar in Hypochondriac. You've got these sections that have a very fast cutting pattern. You have those series, those sections that feel more like Sean Baker's movie, when you have like long shots and the pacing is very slow. You've got the moments where you have these hallucinations moments and things like that. So I guess, how did you approach introducing all of these different styles to the audience, did you think about like introducing them as soon as possible in the movie? Did you think about it actively?
We did, and Addison, the director, who's super talented, it's partially autobiography about his mom and how he was really worried about this. And what we came up with is this is a retelling of his story. This is Will's story. And so details are going to get fuzzy in certain places. Details are going to get very strong in certain places where, I think we talked about this before, where smell and music can trigger memories. And they're vivid. And so with certain things in this film, like there's a cue or he hears something, it triggers and it's sharp. It's in focus, you know, he starts losing it and everything sort of gets degrading, or his flashbacks are pixelated, which I thought was hilarious because he feels that's nostalgic because he's younger. He didn't want, you know, film reels and, you know, light flashes or light leaks and stuff like that, which blew me away because I'm like, people are going to think this is just a bad stream. And so really having it come from Will's head really made it where we could play with the timing. Cross dissolves, a lot of slow ones where memories are blurring in together, you know, cutting to black where there's gaps in his memory because of pain, you know, and he was talking about he did injure his arms and how the 127 hours where that big sort of screeching pain where it's your nerves and how that became part of the film too. So yeah, really it was getting that one piece of, yes, this is from Will's memory. And that really led us down the line of being open to experiment and try. And we went through a million different ideas, you know, cutting scenes in the middle of someone talking because you just don't remember. And, you know, we tried all these different things and it was fun. It was a lot of fun to really go out there.
Okay, thank you. We'll transition to the Q&A, I guess, right? It's the time to do it. So once again, the audience chefs, if you want to dial in, press that call in button at the bottom and do it. I don't have any dials in yet, so we'll go with the YouTube questions. So the first one is for Vashi, and Aldin asks, how to practice film editing?
You've answered your question.
I think we did.
You got to practice. No, but yeah, I mean, that's obviously I think you have to have an active desire to tell a story. That could be a 30-second story, a 1-minute story, a 2-minute story, 15 seconds or 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. But if you have the desire to tell that story, then you're naturally going to put one shot against another and see what happens, see what it feels like. And if you like that, then you add another one and you flop them around. Like only by doing the hands-on part, you could talk about it all day. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be an editor. I want to storytell. I want to do this. Until you put those first 2 shots together, nothing else matters. And you'll be surprised at some points. You'll be disappointed. You could be elated. And that's the mystery that I love, where I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm fucking excited to get there and see, you know? And that's what drives me.
Hell yeah. Okay, that question is not for someone specific, but is for those of you that have been to the film school. So who has been to the film school? I haven't been. Elísabet. Okay, good. So what would you do? So I'm sure, sorry if I'm butchering the name, but Jad Hivervir asks, sorry again, would you have done differently if you had never been to film school to be at the level you are at right now?
No one has ever asked me for my film school diploma when I'm getting a job. It's never happened. And I think you can absolutely become whatever you want with, well, not a brain surgeon, but at least within film, you can become something without a film school.
Yeah.
But I think film school was essential in creating relationships and making mistakes, because that's where you can just dive in and you can be absolutely unafraid and experiment with stuff and forge relationships. And that for me was very important.
Cool. Mike, about editing Florida, Roy Diaz asks, about editing Florida project. How was the edit? How was it to edit kids, and how was the relationship with the director? How must be the relationship in this kind of low budget films?
Yeah, it's interesting because Sean Baker is very, very talented, and he likes to do everything, from helping write the script to direct to edit. And so I was brought on to basically shepherd him, and as a creative and as a technical. This was pre-COVID, and so we were actually editing remote the entire time. So some of the time he was in New York, I was in LA. We were never editing in the same room, and so it was really interesting to have that separation. And at the same time, Sean's a night editor. He does not work during business hours. He works through midnight. Oh, he's basically going to bed at like 5 a.m. And so then I get everything, and I'm sending stuff to New York. And so it was really interesting to see his process and picking up on his little nuances. And, with me, certain people, I'm a very, very clean timeline kind of person. I want it to be legible. I want anyone can walk in and see what I'm doing. Some people are not. And so helping with that, helping to sort of get these ground rules through was really important. But the funny thing we were saying is he went from Tangerine shooting on an iPhone with no kids to shooting on 35 millimeter with kids. We're going, you're crazy. This is insane. And he's his directing style is so interesting because these kids would walk out in the field and he'd be yelling, go to the left, fall, you go slower, you go this. So he's very active, but that made audio so much more difficult because we're ducking. I'm trying to get, do we have room tone, kind of thing. And so it was really a lot of audio work for this film, but it works so well because it is very docu style. It was a great experience to see him and how he works and sort of taking some of those keys and using it in my own. The film was just so much fun to work on.
Perfect. A question from Last Directions for Audrey. How do you manage the long working hours with family life?
With family life, I have no kids.
That helps.
That's easier.
That helps.
I just have cats and a boyfriend, but no, I don't have kids. And one of the reasons I don't have kids is that I don't picture myself having a good work, a good balance, family work. And I love my work so much. If I would have to sacrifice my time on my family, if I had one, I think I would be sad to not be as free as I am today, to do also the hours of work that I want to do. When I'm alone in the editing room, sometimes I'm not a morning person, but more an evening person. When I decide that this is the end of the day, sometimes it's the moment specifically where I have ideas and I stay 1 hour, 2 hours more because I feel creative at this moment. Maybe because of the emergency of going home. I don't know. This is where you start processing better. But if I had kids that wait for me at home, I think I would not feel good about it. But maybe I would be more of a morning person. I don't know.
But I have 4 kids, Audrey. It's fine.
Simon has 3.
Okay.
Right? Simon?
It never bothered me. It's never been like a problem. You have 2?
Actually,
but I guess this is not something I really want in the end because
female and male, so you don't really count the same way. But I'm telling Audrey, it's fine.
Okay.
I did actually talk about it.
But I do also, I'm a big believer in bringing kids with you. And I always tell people when I'm working with them in LA, treat them like LA dogs. Just bring them. Like, what's the problem? I think that's the problem of society, that we treat children as problem, as something that has to be outside of our lives.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't like having them playing with the Lego on the floor while I'm editing scenes. It's like, it doesn't bother me. So it actually worked out really well.
Treat them like LA dogs. I'm gonna remember this one.
It works with your chaos theory.
Yeah, actually, I did ask this question about like the balance, right? To Zach Arnold, that I liked his answer when he told me that for him it's about like not work-life balance, but work-life presence. The more important thing is whether you're present, like 100% present when you're with people that you care about. Anyway, we have Jan from the Editing Chef with a question, so I will let him in. He will join us in a second.
Hello, do you hear me?
Hello, Jan. Hello, good to see you.
I just wanted to thank you for the event. It's very inspirational for us, I think, for all of us. I have so much questions, but I've picked like the one broad one, and I don't have like any specific one who will answer. Maybe you will have like the great story about that, because the question is, do you have like have you had like the moment that you made a mistake and you thought that is the biggest mistake, and like after that you will like end your career, and then it turned out like the biggest lesson of your like editing career? So maybe some of you, I don't have like the specific person to ask, but maybe someone has like some great history of one mistake that he or she remember like really well.
This
So we're just going to expose ourselves and tell you what horrible things we've done.
But I think, isn't this the beauty of editing, really, that you don't really make mistakes because of how the process is. So all mistakes are cut. If they happen, they're cut. So it's never going out. But you make decisions that might define you. You make decisions that you might regret later. But that's just part of life, So I think you have to live with it and learn from it. But do we make mistakes like going out? I don't think so.
I've made a pretty big mistake. But there was a show that I worked on once, and I live quite far from London. I live about a 2-hour each way commute into and out of London, and it was a big job for me. So to try and get the edge on the work, I would do work on the train, and then one day on the train from London to Brighton, there was a guy standing behind me on the train who saw what I was doing, and he took a picture of what I was doing over my shoulder, and the star of the show, and he tagged the star of the show and he tweeted the photo onto Twitter.
Ouch.
And the next day, yeah.
Ouch.
And not only did he do that, but it was clearly me. Like, it was me sat there, and I had the Avid open. It had an Avid timeline, and it had a bin, and it had a source record monitor, and quite a famous person, very famous person. And so he tagged the famous person. And so what happens? The famous person is the first person who gets a notification on his phone to say, you know, the editor's working on the train doing this thing. So the next day I get into work, and unbeknownst to me, obviously this blew up amongst the bosses, right? And there were people high up in charge who were ready to, you know, rip me a new one. And the star in question turned around and said, "Hang on a minute, he was working on his commute, give him a break," right? And he was like, Simon's like the hardest working person going, you know, like he made a mistake, but he made a mistake, you know, working his ass off. So you know, they saw, they treated me very lightly. They could have, you know, absolutely ripped me a new one. But and the lesson to take away from that, and it was what my boss, the exec, sent me in a text. He sent me a text saying, "There are eyes everywhere. People are always watching." So what I've learned from that is not to work on your commute, certainly not in Avid. And not to talk about, you know, the shows that you work on, definitely before they've finished. I mean, you know, now, like something like Star Wars, I won't even have it on any of my computers or my, I don't want it. I don't want it anywhere near, my machines. I don't want it in an email. I don't want a picture of it. Before it's been on TV. So that's the big lesson. So yeah, so I made a big mistake. Would you call that one a mistake, Elizabeth?
Quite
a
story.
Yes, not an editing mistake, but it's a very human mistake. I can understand it must have been a terrifying experience. I'm sorry you had to go through it, but it's a good lesson. Enjoy your commute. I think that's important.
Work-life balance.
I
got one too after you, Jacob.
I think it'll be a funny one. I mean, I'm trying to reassure you, right? So this was one of my very first jobs out of film school, and I got a job as the assistant editor on an indie comedy feature. This is in the late 1990s, so this is an era of about $1 million feature. It starred Stephen Ray and Ileana Douglas and Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall and Richard Kind and John Ritter. And I was working for an editor named Mark Fitzgerald, and I was very green. So I had gotten my way into here by saying I knew how to do a couple of things that I didn't know how to do yet. And it was on Avid, and I was doing fine. But by the time he was actually cutting scenes, he would leave. I had some cleanup work to do, etc. And this thing started happening where he would show up the next day, and we would arrive around the same time, and he'd say, "Jacob, this whole sequence is out of sync. What did you do?" Right? And my first reaction, which was ridiculous, was, well, it wasn't me. There's only one person it could have been, right? There's only one person who could have thrown the thing out of sync, and it was me. But I was flabbergasted. How the hell did that happen? So this happened like 2 or 3 more times, right? Luckily, he was somewhat forgiving, and he allowed me to just, take the extra time to fix it. And I don't remember how it resolved. I figured out how to not put myself out of sync anymore, right? But anyways, he was forgiving enough, and we marched our way along, and I was good at the rest of the stuff, and I got a lot better, But anyways, that was one that was very embarrassing frequently.
A lot of it seems to be technical. It's definitely, like Elizabeth said, it's not the actual editorial that's the problem. Like, you can catch that. You'll just see a problem. You're like, that's a problem. Let's fix it. It's usually the technical. I'll give you a quick one that embarrassed me, almost crushed me. But about 10, 12 years ago, I had a documentary that I had edited for the director, and it was premiering at Austin Film Festival. And we had a Blu-ray of the latest cut. We made some changes literally like 2 days before, and I had to FedEx overnight the new Blu-ray. And there's a cutoff at FedEx at like 4:30 in Santa Monica or whatever it was. And I'd been burning these Blu-rays and sending like every couple days. Everything was great. And so when I went to the cutoff to make sure I got it there, I burned the Blu-ray, put it in the packaging, sent it. That was the only time I didn't try and play the Blu-ray before I sent it. And this was for the like premiere, or the soft premiere at there. And so I sent it. The next day I got a call. He goes, "You sent me a coaster. It doesn't play." And so all the last 2 days of edits and changes and adjustments and mixing and everything that I did for the premiere didn't play. No time to send a new one. He had to show an earlier cut, which must have killed him as a director, being like, "We're so far past this now. Like, it's leaps and bounds better." And you know how much you can do in 2 days to adjust, to get feedback, to make those tweaks, to really make it sing. And he had to show an older version, and he gave me the business. Oh, I've never once, after that, again, technical mistake, never once didn't triple, quadruple check something, an asset, an output, whatever, frame by frame. I don't care how long it takes. It's your reputation. It's your name attached to it. It's your perception from other people that has to be pristine. And that was the last time, knock on wood, that I screwed up something like that.
Wow, that's a good one as well. I love this question, by the way. This is so good.
Wasn't good at the time, Piotr.
No, it was not.
The thing is that,
But that's it. That's the way that life divides into good time or good story, right? So,
Yeah.
Jan, did you want to say something?
yes, I want to say that those mistakes, like from the perspective of now, they are like funny, and but after like sending the wrong film, you could like just at that moment you could think that you have to end your career because it's so big mistake. And also the Jacob the point that Jacob put, that at the beginning, I think that you have to like pretend a lot that you can do some things, because when you are starting and people like ask you, when you cut like the first documentary, if someone big like ask you that if you can like edit the documentary, you will always like respond that you can, because you want to like get the first big project. So at the beginning
you had to get the experience somehow.
you had to get this experience somehow. So that's why I wanted to question about the mistakes. So because it's the like.
And I like that question. And I think it's important that we give room for mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think what Simon is saying, or Vashi, because if you're working and people make mistakes, you included, in a business that's so harsh and cruel, be kind. You know what I mean? We have to be the change. Just be kind. Because the people those are not life or death threatening mistakes, you know. It's a freaking mistake. It's so doesn't matter in the big picture. So we have to be the change. Just be kind. If someone that comes after you or before you makes a mistake, just be freaking kind.
You're making thousands of decisions, you know?
It's like
you're making thousands of decisions. No one's perfect. It's art, you know? No one absolutely loves every piece of art. And so at the same time, it's asking questions. That is a huge thing. If you don't know somebody, find someone you can trust that you can ask them and tell them you don't know. Because those are the best people I've worked with, where I learned a lot from other editors on shows that weren't that great, but at the same time, we're handing off tricks and tips and telling each other why are you keep knocking this out of sync? You know, it's like, well, you have this, you're not using this button, you know, kind of thing. And so that's the big thing, is just to be vocal about, yes, you are going to bend some rules to get your first job, you know, kind of thing. But at the same time is be vocal, and you're screwing up is part of the process. Everybody does it. Some more memorable than others, but it's still, don't be afraid.
Awesome.
I so support that, Mike.
Jan, I will.
I am so sorry. I'm being pulled out. I have to go.
No worries.
It's been such an honor to sit with you and talk with you. I want to meet all of you for coffee.
Yeah, that's my dream, that we do the Roundtable one day in person. That would be amazing. That's the dream for the future.
But thank you for including me. Such an honor, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elísabet.
Thank you, Elísabet.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna say goodbye as well. I'm a little late on getting to some students.
Okay, no worries.
I have to do it.
Thank you, Jacob.
It was such a pleasure chatting with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who was asking questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. It's time to wrap it up anyway. Thank you everyone.
Thank you, man. Like, thank you for bringing us together to do this. I think you're
Seriously.
incredible. Like, I love how much you enthuse the craft and what's being done. Like, it helps remind us what's good about it when we're tired.
Thank you, Simon.
You're opening the edit bay, which a lot of people don't get the experience of being in, and it's very few people, and so it's just another art form. Come on in.
And Piotr, thank you for introducing me to such a beautiful group of editors and human beings, because we see pictures or we text or we sometimes don't see face to face, and this is my first time with so many of you, and it really makes me feel good.
Amazing. Thank you once again. Okay, so thank you once again for all of the YouTube listeners, and see you next time.